Indigenous peoples have an important perspective, have an important understanding. This is an understanding that we would like to share with other people. Everything is connected. We very much depend on wildlife species. They take care of us, and it's a responsibility that we have to take care of them.
1 million species of animals and plants around the world are now at risk of extinction.
There is amazing work being done in every region of the globe by Indigenous peoples responding to the dual crises of biodiversity loss and climate change.
What our people have been doing for a long time, restoring the country using fire. We need to burn areas like this to maintain the vegetation, the fuel loads. We want to try and restore it to back was thousands of years ago.
We noticed a lot of changes in the water and the weather with climate change. That's where we came in with the staff gauges and started putting them into tributaries of the Liard River.
So coho salmon were natural and native to this stream and to this area, but they were extirpated due to the dams, habitat degradation, and other things. And the tribe took it upon itself to bring those species back to this area. As soon as the water returned back into the naturally constructed channel, we had coho in here spawning. It was magical, it was special for that to happen.
We are looking after and managing country on behalf of our ancestors and our youth, but also on behalf of the broader non-Indigenous communities as well.
80% of the world's biodiversity is located on Indigenous land. There is no better strategy than re-empowering Indigenous peoples to continue that work, caring for land.
Indigenous-led conservation projects can be found across the globe. In Canada, Indigenous nations and communities are working to protect and steward lands and waters, including vast areas of the boreal forest, the largest intact forest on the planet. It is home to hundreds of millions of tons of ancient carbon reserves, the largest remaining migratory caribou herds, and the nursery for 5 billion birds that migrate through the entire Western Hemisphere.
I'm Valérie Courtois. I'm the director of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. Essentially, what we really work on is that Indigenous nations can have the authority or the decision-making power over their lands because they have cultural responsibilities, and it is really important that as nations they can work and decide what is best for them. We also work on Indigenous protected and conserved areas. These are areas that are designated under Indigenous law and Indigenous authority and then negotiated with Crown governments for reciprocity. So a good example of that is areas like Adégie in the Northwest Territories, where it was designated under the Dehcho Assembly and then reciprocated by the Government of Canada through its National Wildlife Act, or an area like Haida-Nénéné, which was enacted under Lutzelk'e's authority and then reciprocated with Canada's National Parks legislation.
Indigenous nations have led the creation of almost 90% of protected areas in Canada in the past 2 decades. Scores of proposed Indigenous protected and conserved areas could span over 500,000 square kilometers. Dene Ke Kusan is an Indigenous protected and conserved area proposal to protect 40,000 square kilometers of Kaska ancestral territory in British Columbia. The area includes vast expanses of boreal forests, extensive wetlands, mountain ranges, and wild rivers. This proposal would protect this area forever, preserving its rich biodiversity. The Kaska people can re-establish their traditional laws for the care of land.
In the world that we live in now, having healthy and sustainable communities is really our nation's goal, and we know that in order to do that, we have to connect back to some very key knowledge systems that we've had for millennia. The Kaska have been, in a lot of ways, protecting these lands for thousands of years, so the concept isn't new. We see ourselves as the original conservationists.
From a conservation science tradition, really protected areas were often seen as areas that had to be excluded from other things. From an Indigenous point of view, that's not the case. Really, protected areas or IPCAs are about being active on the landscape. Guardians are our boots on the ground, or the moccasins and mucklucks are people who are on location, who are actively managing, actively monitoring these areas.
So we're at Iron Creek. This is a tributary to the Liard River. This is one of our staff gauge stations. Right now we're just collecting our data for our staff gauge. So here we're gonna collect the water depth, and we also collect the pH, DO percentage, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, the water temperature, and then turbidity, and start our own baseline data for the First Nations.
The Guardians are truly the eyes and the ears on the ground in all areas of our traditional territory, whether they're doing patrols, whether they're engaging with communities, whether they're working with elders. They are doing so many things that goes beyond just surveying the land.
Having our youth brought in this year is just amazing. Having these Guardian programs and giving them the opportunity to come out and work with us as well as elders and learn their traditional and culture. Like, I don't know how you could ask for anything better for a job.
As of 2022, over 120 Indigenous Guardian programs protect and steward lands and waters across Canada, often in remote places that existing government agencies don't actively manage, doing work that Canadian governments don't always prioritize.
Conservation officers, they don't come up. I think it's just too far for them. Without the Guardians monitoring the hunters that come up so they don't poach or anything, if we don't do it, the Guardians and the COs, conservation officers, aren't up here to do it, no one would be doing it.
Here is truly like being home in so many ways, and it's so powerful to be able to know that we can live in these lands that our ancestors have lived in for thousands of years, and we get to raise our children here, our people are buried here, and we continue to be here, and we will always be here. And that's why we called our Indigenous protected area Denak'e-Kusan, to symbolize the fact that we will always be here, and there's nothing more important than that.
What's happening in Canada could be a model globally. This is not new, this notion that Indigenous peoples have something to offer to the conservation world. We've been doing it for 10,000 years in our case, and in some places much longer if we think about our brothers and sisters in Australia.
My name's Dennis Rose. I'm a Gunditjmara traditional owner for First Nations person of southwest Victoria in the southeast of Australia. And I'm also the chair of Country Needs People. Country Needs People is a not-for-profit organisation that advocates, particularly to government, for increased funding for Indigenous Ranger program and also the Indigenous Protected Area program. Indigenous Protected Areas, or IPAs, cover an area of more than 74 million hectares, around about 50% of Australia's total protected area. There are upwards of 125 individual ranger projects that are being funded throughout the country. And an important part of their role is to work closely with national park agencies and other environmental agencies to combine traditional knowledge but also of the up-to-date methods of science to assist in this land management.
My name is Justin Howard. I work with the Barijawi Rangers doing land management. We're at the part of Barijawi country, north of Broome. Barijawi people identify themselves as saltwater people. So out here in Barijawi country, we got the coral reef systems, we got the mangroves, and then behind us we have monsoon vine thickets, and then behind the monsoon vine thickets is the woodland. It's really important for traditional people and biodiversity.
The Barijawi Rangers use traditional burning techniques as a way to reduce large wildfires and preserve biodiversity.
Today we'll be heading to a little place not too far away from here. We burned it early in the year, but half of the area has burnt, so burn the area that hasn't been burnt.
People have been using fire as a means of getting the country healthy for centuries. which means if the country is healthy, then we become healthy too as well.
We're still doing the same methodology, but now we're integrating technology. All that's done, ready to burn. So we're saving some carbon by burning early and leaving vegetation in unburnt areas. If you do it in the later season, you'll burn everything that's in this patch, and that's more carbon going into the atmosphere that we don't want.
As we face these changing times and certainly the effects of climate change, cultural burning will be even more important to help protect country from these wildfires.
As traditional fire practices have increased, large wildfires have decreased. Studies have shown that huge, devastating fires have been cut in half across northern Australia. Fire management also helps habitats thrive. In this area, rangers help protect the largest tropical savanna in the world.
We're in the woodland. This area is burnt. And you can see, even in the burnt area, there's still some brown grasses, a little bit mosaic patchiness. And you can also see new shoots growing, new grasses coming back. We want to get the fuel down and make mosaic patches all over the country. We have different grasses seeding for the birds and little mammals and reptiles to feed on, but then also create habitat within the burnt areas where there's still patches of grass. We've seen some Goldens. There's like 6 or 7 of them. It's an indicator in woodlands to show it's healthy.
Traditional knowledge that's been passed on from generation to generation is probably the most important part of our knowledge in making sure we manage country. Knowing the reef, knowing the different seasons, it's the most important tool. The rest of the world need to listen to Indigenous people and support them, support Indigenous people. Give them the resources to manage country, work with them. The knowledge we have by looking after country, maintaining it, protecting it, we're doing it on behalf, not us, but the world we live in.
My name is Eric Stegman. I'm the CEO of Native Americans in Philanthropy, and my mother's family is from the Carry the Kettle Nakota First Nation. Native Americans in Philanthropy is a 30-year-old organization, and what we are is a national coalition of tribal community leaders, philanthropic funders, and other stakeholders who are working together to advocate for stronger investments by the philanthropic sector in tribal communities, but to also make sure that those investments are more in line with our values as Indigenous people. One of the things a lot of people don't realize is that tribes all over the country are doing a lot of work to manage entire systems. You're looking at these big watersheds and certain coastal areas. There's a lot of different pieces of the climate and conservation issue, but we need to talk about how those systems all interact with each other from a natural point of view. A lot of the Western, science and sort of conservation field are starting to really wake up once they see how resilient some of these systems are too, and Native people have been trying to communicate that for a long time.
One example can be found in the Columbia River watershed, one of the largest river systems in North America. There, the Umatilla, Warm Springs, Yakima, and Nez Perce tribes formed the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission to save salmon from near extinction.
When the treaties were signed by the tribes in 1855, there was it estimated 15 to 20 million salmon returned to the Columbia each year. By the 1920s, that number had already been more than halved because of overharvest. And then the dams went in and that number went down even further. In 1977, there were fewer than 1 million salmon. So in 1977, one of the goals was that we need to reverse this decline or we're going to lose them. The tribes in the Columbia Plateau put together what's called Waikonishmi-Waukeshiwit, which means Spirit of the Salmon. It's a salmon restoration plan, and it worked. These red downward lines have now turned into green upward lines. Today, there's work that's going on in all stretches of the Columbia Basin. Restored thousands of miles of streams, building these active restoration hatcheries that are designed to kind of just rebuild salmon runs to mitigate for the fact that the dams are having such an outsized toll on these fish.
Indigenous peoples are often the first to notice changes to an ecosystem and to raise the alarm. But governments don't always listen. For the member tribes of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, while they had success with salmon, they saw a threat to other species that tribes relied on.
Pacific lamprey, it is a native species. It has been here for time immemorial. Just like salmon, they spend part of their life out in the ocean, and they're bringing in all those marine-derived nutrients back to the freshwater. Anything from birds of prey and wolves, bears would be eating these things in the stream.
The efforts of restoration for Pacific lamprey really started with tribal people alongside salmon, and really looking at the whole picture of the aquatic web. From here, from the Clearwater River here at the Nez Perce Tribal Hatchery, there are 8 dams, 4 on the Columbia River and 4 along the Snake River. They weren't designed with lamprey in mind.
So if 300,000 lamprey come into the Columbia, they reach Bonneville Dam, only half of those fish make it past Bonneville. So, you have Bonneville, you have the Dalles, you have John Day, and you're losing half the fish. So over, 60 years, we've lost, a lot of fish.
While some modifications have been added to the dams, Pacific lamprey are still not able to arrive in many upstream habitats in adequate numbers. Since 2007, the Nez Perce tribe has been translocating lamprey as a last resort to reconnect them with these inland habitats.
We just trapped a number of lamprey from Bonneville Dam to be translocated upriver to the Nez Perce tribe.
The translocation process, what happens is there's traps set up in the ladders on Bonneville, John Day, and the Dalles dams. They're collected. We go down, put them in our tanks, then we drive them all the way back up here. We'll direct release to let them pick any part of the river that they choose to.
The lamprey decline happened unbeknownst to the majority of the region. There's no concept that they were even a fundamental part of this ecosystem. Whereas the tribes here, knowing that from our oral stories and having myths and legends and part of our feasts all built around them, intimately aware that their numbers have been dwindling.
We trapped approximately 163 adult lamprey.
We're just icing them down. The long trip, the water gets pretty warm on our trip, so.
It's about a 4-hour, 5-hour drive, but with those additional stops, it turns into about a 6-hour, 7-hour day.
And we just wear our white cotton gloves so we can handle them easier. Otherwise, they just slip out, be everywhere. Put them in our net buckets so that we can take a DNA clip from them.
So if people even knew that lamprey were around, they had that reaction that, oh, they're a weird fish, they're a monster, or they thought that they were invasive because they might be confusing them with the sea lamprey that have invaded the Great Lakes. Or even further back, they were actively eradicated. They were considered a trash fish or a pest fish, and so they were poisoned to make way for more game fish. In fact, some of the dams just stopped counting them. So we have data gaps because people thought, well, they're gone, or who cares? Because of this whole infrastructure that had been built up for salmon, the tribes having this expertise, knowledge, and know-how of what to do in restoration work, we were able to point it at this animal.
The tissue samples get collected on the ground in the streams and then are sent to Hagerman, and tissues go into extraction in the lab, and DNA is extracted, and then we have a set of genetic markers that are genotyped on every single fish.
The Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission's genetic lab stores generations of lamprey DNA. They have shown that the offspring of the translocated lamprey have survived in upstream habitats.
So the primary goal of the genetic monitoring has been, can we show that the translocation program is achieving this primary objective? And we showed that, definitively, the translocation programs were being successful. It's really been the tribe's interest in Pacific lamprey that has really made this possible.
we might pick up 7 fish one day. And people are like, wow, you would have a 12-hour day to pick up 7 fish. And I'm like, yeah.
It's not just restoring the water systems or the habitat, it's restoring relationships. You know, you're applying the knowledge of your ancestors and you're applying it to look generations ahead because you want that relationship to remain for, you know, your grandkids and their great-grandkids.
They've always had their place here. Lamprey needs somebody to kind of look out for them. You know, it's part of who we are, how we believe that everything has its place.
In many parts of the world, Indigenous peoples' efforts to conserve their homelands have been met with resistance and violence. Many put their lives on the line to protect areas that are critical to the fight against climate change and biodiversity loss. But the stories you have just seen show what is possible instead. When governments, philanthropy, and the public embrace Indigenous leadership and conservation, everybody benefits.
I think the urgency is in front of everyone right now, but the urgency's really been in front of Native people for a long time. We've always been at the front lines of this because we've been the stewards of these lands and waterways, and we know that change that may have seemed gradual to some people has not been gradual in our communities. So we've felt this urgency for a long time. I think some sectors have started to awaken to this more than others, but there's been a real lack of alignment in that sense of urgency. And I'm hoping that the philanthropic sector and the public policy sector are going to finally start to really come together around some of these big issues because we really need all the resources we can get.
The world's approach to preserving biodiversity is known as 30 by 30 and represents a goal shared by nations around the world to protect 30% of lands and 30% of waters by 2030. Some scientists believe that ultimately the world should protect 50% of lands and waters to give natural systems the room they need to sustain themselves.
30 by 30 to me is a genuine opportunity because it offers a space where countries are committed to have a conversation on conservation. And 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is on Indigenous lands. Governments are investing in order to meet this target. Those are the perfect ingredients to show leadership.
There's a lot of issues where Native people have largely been invisible. We haven't even been thought to be invited to the tables in the past. The only way you're going to deal with the solution is to actually center us in the solution. And that means really listening to Indigenous people, not as another stakeholder group, but as one of the primary stakeholder groups that's actually going to get us to a better future in this issue.
They're not impossible targets. They certainly should be achievable targets. We do need that commitment from government.
And if we're going to get to the 30 by 30, we need to do that by enabling Indigenous people's leadership. All of them have something to contribute to the sustainability of our planet. And they all deserve to achieve their ambitions and being able to be supported in their leadership.
This growing movement of Indigenous leadership is showing all of us how to protect the planet. It's up to the rest of the world to follow.
Now, of all times, it's imperative that I think people listen to Indigenous peoples.
The time is really right for Indigenous voices to be heard, for Indigenous land management practices to be more broadly recognised and to be valued by the broader community.
It does feel like we're at a very pivotal time to be able to make that shift and that connection. And we need everyone to jump on board to help us do it.
You know, tribal knowledge should be valued in management practices. They have a connection to that land.
Our very survival depends on our landscapes being sustainable. We all have an interest in sustainability because we only have one Earth. We need to get this right, and Indigenous peoples can show us the way.